Welcome back to the internet's only free hieroglyphic class week to week, Sunday to Sunday. Well, the episodes come out on Sundays. You don't have to watch them on Sundays. I mean, you can watch them at 2 in the morning on a Wednesday. But they're here. You're part of it, and I'm so glad you're a part of this class. Let's jump in, starting with last week's homework. So, with this phrase, let's dissect this piece by piece. And to start off, what do we recognize? What looks familiar? I mean, you may know some words, but what stands out to you? And let's start with what's our stopping post there at the beginning? And then we have what is a determinative there in the middle. How do we know what both of these are? Well, that top glyph pairing, the I and W, the papyrus reed and the chick, that's our signpost that says we are about to go into the past tense. It translates to someone in the past did something. We don't translate it, we just use it as a stopping post. And then, of course, we know this is a determinative in the second set of glyphs there because it has a stroke line, and anything with a stroke line is a determinative. Also, you probably don't recognize that as a sound glyph. All right, next step, we're going to transliterate everything with sound complements. And even with this, we're going to recognize, or rather we're going to uncover just how many echo sounds we have, where we have a single sound next to the pairing or a bilateral sound. And as we know, whenever you see this, they cancel each other out. They're just there to either expand or as a reminder of what the sound the bilateral glyph makes. All right, so I think we've settled on all of that. Let's go through now and make a translation. So first we have on the top row the verb to approach, which we learned last week. And we see this is followed by the water sign, which puts it in the past tense, ed. Of course, we also had our signpost telling us we were about to go into our past tense, so there's our big clue. And who in the case is going into the past tense? Well, it's a man. So you would translate this to the man approached, as opposed to, to approach, ed, man. So yeah, you've got to, Egyptianize it or anglicize it into English. Then the second row, we have the word the lower part, and then followed by interior of the house, which, again, 2 words that we learned last week, trying to incorporate the vocabulary, which is, hey, why it's a vocabulary building course. And then that's followed by her. So, one thing to notice is we've added a T here to the noun interior of the house because, well, the person who the interior house belongs to is her, which is a feminine word, a female. So, in order to make them actually relate, then we're going to add the T so that it flows. All right, and that means the whole sentence will read, the man approached the lower part of her house, hopefully to bring her flowers or candy or jewelry, or if it's ancient Egypt, maybe a cat. Who knows? But I'm going to go, he's bringing her a present. Because why else would he go to the lower part of her home? Because that's like, what, underground? I don't know. Either way, there you go, and that is the way to run through all of our homework and all of your Stella deciphering. Next up, we have none other than the fish.
I wonder where that fish has gone.
All right, otherwise known as the Nile carp, this is our next bilateral sound, which is I-N, in. I tend to think of it as the fish is in the Nile. I know, hey, it works. So you always start from the nose when you do a fish, and you're going to go backwards. So I'm doing it at an angle here just to illustrate, but I'll show you why it shouldn't be at an angle. And after the 2 corresponding angles in, you've got 2 angles out, then connecting them with the tail, and then you can add the midsection, the eye, and the detail for the fins, giving it a, it's amazing how once you put the eye on, like you immediately get what it is. Otherwise it just looks like a shape. So yeah, just a quick half moon for the midsection, and then I've gone ahead and drawn the fins, top and bottom, to the right there, so you could see how they look not attached, but they're basically 3-stroke and 2-stroke add-ons to add the detail. And of course, you can add as many, scales as you want and tiny details like you can with any glyph. Now, this fish is not to be confused with the other fish, which is ha. This is in. There are 2, that one is pointing down, one is facing forward, one has a long nose, one does not. Otherwise, they're extremely similar. So as long as you remember to point your fish down and give it a long nose, or point it straight and shorten the nose, then, hey, now you have 2 glyphs in one. All right, so looking at some words that incorporate this, and not too many start with this for reasons we're going to get to in a moment, but let's just look at this first word. And of course, just like we did with our homework, we're going to start by transliterating it and then translating it. So first thing we have is we have I followed by IN, followed by N, which I did not draw there, followed by NM, followed by M, and then a determinative. Yep, I left out adding an extra N for the water sign, but it still has the same effect because you've got a double, in fact, triple echo effect going on here, where you have multiple single sounds surrounded by double sounds. It would have worked better if I wrote in the other N. I'll do that. I know I did that on the next one. See, this is what happens when I draw them first and then record afterwards, and then realize, oh, shoot, I forgot a letter. All right, and that is not st, by the way, up there. It is not the letter ST, which looks very similar. Remember, that has an arrow going through it. So without the arrow, it's a determinative. You also know it's a determinative because it's at the end, and it looks odd. And why would you end with a double consonant like that? You almost never end a word with a double consonant bilateral sound. All right, so back to all of our double, triple entendre echo sounds. So once you've canceled everything else out, you'll realize you're left with INM, inim, which is the ancient Egyptian word for skin. The reason that you see that glyph at the end is that's the skin of an animal, just without the arrow. And it's written much shorter or much longer. So here, the reason we have such a longer version is, again, when they're written on walls and on papyrus, you have to write to the amount of space you have. So if you want to write the word skin with a lot of glyphs, hey, there you go. You could, of course, always shorten that. All right, here's another word. Very similar. You notice, once again, the IN sound is floating above the N sound. And we're going to actually dive into this, no pun intended, because it's actually going to be very pun intended. So transliterating, and this time I remembered that extra N, so you have the IN, followed by N, followed by B. So once again, same thing where you have a double consonant surrounded by single consonants that cancel it out. Now, one reason I said this is done is because of space, but you can't begrudge an ancient Egyptian a sense of humor. So looking at this, where you have the IN sound above the N, well, what is that? That's a fish above water or a fish in water. That's the joke. They actually do this on purpose. You see this a lot in hieroglyphics because Egyptians had a sense of humor, and it's obvious from their use of glyphs that they did. They could easily write this word without the fish and the water sound, but that's added because, well, it's funny. Get it? And that's also why both of those glyphs were developed as long, flat glyphs, because they stack very easily. If you just put the IN at the beginning, it wouldn't work. It would be hanging out in the front, and Egyptians want their stuff to look nice. All right. It wasn't just, honorific transposition or graphical transposition, but they would deliberately write words in ways that would be aesthetically pleasing, whether they were elongated or not. So yes, having a fish above the water sign in the middle of a word makes it very aesthetically pleasing, and it makes the whole word one rectangle, as opposed to, one flat long sign hanging off the front. Oh, and this is the word wall, by the way, if you couldn't tell from the determinative. Okay, that's going to wrap up this week. We got an exciting week next week where we're going to look at none other than the Eye of Horus, because, well, it's the basic eye shape is coming up next in our bilateral sounds. So makes sense to finally get to that Eye of Horus fun. All right, see you next week. Thanks for watching.